morning, everyone, and welcome. As we aim to open the way for more women to be able to make their full range of contributions to our world, we thought that a poem by Rosario Castellanos would be particularly appropriate as part of the introduction to our program today. For those of you who may not be familiar with her, Rosario Castellanos was a Mexican author and diplomat who immensely and passionately contributed to the advancement of women in the 20th century through her work, her ideas, and her literature, paving the way for our efforts today. In the midst of the current global COVID-19 crisis and the deep reflections it is bringing about the most essential aspects of our way of life and the way we've run our world, and as we, the participants in today's event, are seeking to help create and give birth to a world that is more just, fair, and that offers opportunities for all to express their talents and develop their potential, we felt that a poem of the profundity and intense sensibility that characterize Rosario Castellanos could capture our experience, our hopes, and our intentions as we navigate these challenging times, filled with strong potential for transformation and renewal. The poem is in Spanish, and it is called Falsa Elegía. Compartimos solo un desastre lento. Me veo morir en ti, en otro, en todo. Todavía bostezo o me distraigo como ante el espectáculo aburrido. Se destejen los días, las noches se consumen antes de darnos cuenta. Así nos acabamos. Nada es, nada está entre el alzarse y el caer del párpado. Pero si alguno va a nacer, su anuncio, la posibilidad de su inminencia y su trastorna lo existente, puede más que lo real y desaloja el cuerpo de los vivos.
But if anyone is going to be born, the great announcement, the possibility of its imminence and its weighty syllable in the air disrupts what exists, ignites more than what we think is real, and dislodges the body of the living. We have nicknamed today's program New Day's Heroes, those who dislodge, those who disrupt what exists, so that a new earth can be born. It's the leopard coming forward, and she is not just any leopard. She's in the eyes of the students, our New Day's heroes, and the clients they worked with this year, and their university faculty. We raise them up today and share them with the world, with those who can and will join in our efforts to look at the world with an awakened eye, the one that can see in the dark and brave the forests of inequality until she is free to not accept the status quo and to say so. That's what these students are doing with their research to advance women, not to become competitors to men, but equal partners. Equal partners. 75% of all women-led small and medium enterprises in Latin America lack access to adequate funding. Today, we're taking a step in the right direction, the only direction. Today, we will hear how young people's recommendations can and will be implemented to transform the world, because their ideas are born of the spirit of the leopard, that ancient, wise being that always prioritizes the life of love. We've been waiting for this for a long time. The United Nations will publish our research and make the Sustainable Development Goals a living reality today. I thank the Aspen Institute in Mexico, and especially Monica Lopez Giron for our collaboration on co-hosting this event, and all of our distinguished and inspiring speakers. I thank the Embassy of the State of Qatar, Women Forward International's founding donor, who made this research and presentation possible. We have a special surprise to close today's program. We look forward to your joining our dynamic speaker presentation today and to coming together to celebrate in music the unity, collaboration, and service to humanity brought on by this possibility of imminence. I now turn the floor over to Ambassador Enrique Berruga, Executive Director of Aspen Institute, Mexico, for his opening remarks.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for sharing this forum with us. For Aspen Institute, Mexico is very important and is part of our main activities to pursue the understanding of women's roles in the world. And as a matter of fact, we were, before the pandemic, engaged into trying to get together a group similar like this, and perhaps even larger, to feed into the process of discussions for the Beijing Plus 25 events. As you know, the calendar was meant to have an event in May in Mexico City, which was the pre-cooking of the final declaration that was going to be endorsed in Paris in July. Obviously, all these things have changed because of the pandemic, but this is just to mention how important this is to us, the whole issue of gender equality and the women's roles in the world. I think that Monica Ducoin, who's also here in our webinar, she's done a remarkable job in terms of getting together the most important groups in Mexico and Central America, as a matter of fact, for trying to understand and to open doors for women in the world of business. I also want to highlight that Kent and I suffer from the same disease of being alumni from SAIS, the Johns Hopkins, and I think this is a very good omen. I would like to stress the fact that we are in a very, I think that if for more than a generation, the world had not lived or gone through something as the conditions as the ones we're living through right now. This is unprecedented, and most likely the wake of all this pandemic will have a tremendous impact in the world, economically speaking and socially, and even perhaps we will have to face a change of culture. So I would invite you, and of course Aspen Mexico is more than ready to join any effort in this direction. I would invite you to think on how this pandemic and its effects will change the world in the next coming months and years, and try to find out what opportunities may be on the horizon that we may actually snatch. I, for one, think that even the labor culture in the world will change. Perhaps we will be more connected through these means in the future than having live events. But not only that, many other businesses that were not in sight will be probably very important in the near future. How can women join that new trend, retraining, relearning? I think that's a very important issue that should be discussed or could be discussed in this forum. I would like to finalize by saying that there are lots of socio-cultural prejudices in the world, especially in Latin America, I would say, preventing women's role in the economy. I always thought that this is very counterproductive, even from the practical point of view. Having at least half of the working force prevented from doing and spreading their talent I think is a big, big mistake. It's not only a matter of fairness, it's a matter of reasoning and a matter of importance for the economies at large and for the well-being of our societies. So I would like to finalize just to wish you every success in this forum that you have organized, and thank you for sharing it with us. We're very happy to partner with Pro Mujer, with Grupo Ananda, obviously with Women Forward International, and of course the Universities of Columbia and Harvard University. Thank you very much for having us, and all success to you.
Thank you, Ambassador Baruga. We will now turn to the Columbia University SIPA student team to present, followed by the Harvard University Kennedy School presentation. The Columbia University SIPA team will be represented by Amun Kamran and Hugo Spalling, who will present on this 8-person team's behalf. And now for our Columbia University SIPA team, welcome.
Thank you so much, Ken.
Hi, everyone. Our project is titled Bridging the Gap Between Women Entrepreneurs and Investors in Mexico. We would like to thank WFI and Aspen Institute for organizing the event today, and of course, our client, Pro Mujer. My name is Aman Kamran, and I will be presenting for the Columbia SIPA project alongside Hugo Spalding. Our team consists of 8 SIPA students representing 5 different countries and studying a range of different topics at Columbia, from international finance, urban policy, and gender. On behalf of the team, I want to express how important this project has been for us. First, because we are all passionate about supporting women entrepreneurship and gender equality around the world. And second, this project was a chance for us to gain practical knowledge on how to advance gender equality and apply it in our professional careers. We are hopeful that the lessons that we learned through this project can be applied in our respective countries. The methodology for our project included 40 interviews with stakeholders in Mexico's entrepreneurship ecosystem. The interview questions were prompted through a literature review the team conducted. These interviews were intended to be done in person. However, of course, due to COVID-19 and international travel restrictions and safety concerns, we had to kind of pivot our methodology, and we did all of our interviews via Skype or Zoom. So everything was conducted virtually. The interviews were divided among 4 key stakeholders. So entrepreneurs, of course, investors, business development providers, who we've classified as accelerators or incubators, and then experts. And the experts are academics, nonprofit organizations, or journalists. And now I'm going to pass it on to Hugo, and he's going to go through the key findings for our report.
Thanks, Aman. So just to highlight a few key statistics that we found from our literature review. As Professor Davis-Packard mentioned, 75% of women-led SMEs in the region lack adequate access to financing. There's a $93 billion credit gap that women in the region face for their businesses. And we found that the gender disparities in financing span from commercial to impact investment, and that only 10% of impact investment went to women-led enterprises. We also found that disparities in women's representation in leadership positions span across the economy, with only 7.5% of management boards in Mexico's leading companies being comprised of women. And finally, we found that women tend to rely on their own savings or family loans more than external sources of capital, such as shareholder capital or bank loans. So looking at some of the individual interviews that we conducted with different actors, we found that women entrepreneurs reported very diverse needs, and that it's very difficult to generalize based on just gender, and that many actually rejected stereotypes that are often applied to women about their domestic responsibilities, or their responsibilities as parents, because not every woman entrepreneur fits into these more narrow categories. We did find that traditional financing options often do not meet the needs of women entrepreneurs, whether it's the rigidity of bank loans or the size of venture capital investments. Many women-led small and growing businesses don't fit the profile for these traditional financing options. And often women reported lacking the networks that they need to connect to investors, as well as reporting a tendency to undervalue women-led businesses. So this could happen both from the investor perspective, but also sort of unequal gender norms within society at times lead some women entrepreneurs to undervalue their own businesses. And this was something that the interviewees highlighted. And finally, women entrepreneurs reported that they needed business development services that are tailored to their specific business needs, whether this is more digital training, more mentorship, but not programming that sort of perpetuates these gender stereotypes about women having domestic responsibilities, et cetera. And from the investor interviews, we found promising evidence that there was widespread awareness of the business case for gender diversity, both within the institutions and within the portfolios of the investors. We did find that there was a perception of women entrepreneurs as risk averse among the investors, which may be a barrier to invest in women-led small and growing businesses. And as I mentioned, there is a mismatch between the types of capital, the ticket sizes being offered by investors, and the needs of women-led small and growing businesses. And this is perpetuating what we found in the literature is referred to as the missing middle in enterprise financing. And finally, we found from the investors that they tend to source investment opportunities from international accelerator programs, such as in Silicon Valley, and also from their own personal networks, rather than looking at the domestic business development service providers that Mexico has. So this may be a roadblock in the path to investment for women entrepreneurs that are in these programs. So to wrap up, when we talked to accelerators in Mexico, we found promising evidence that there is a gender balance in many of their programs. The disparities in investment in women appear to be happening after the accelerator stage. So a lot of these business development service providers are taking active measures to find women-led businesses. And although the perceptions vary of these businesses and sort of their ability to attract capital, they did report that women-led businesses found greater difficulty once they finished their program in terms of attracting seed investment. And I'm going to turn it back to Aman for our recommendations.
Thanks, Hugo. So we came up with 7 recommendations based on the interview findings. A lot of them are sourced specifically from the women entrepreneur interviews, but we got insights for all of them. So the first 2 recommendations are specifically for investors. The first one outlines the need to adopt a comprehensive gender strategy. This strategy includes gathering gender disaggregated data, establishing targets to improve gender balance at investment banks, taking actions to reduce unconscious biases, and providing feedback to every entrepreneur, whether they receive funding or not. Recommendation 2 speaks to the need to have more collaboration among the ecosystem players. And so we recommend that investors and accelerators deepen their relationship in order to get entrepreneurs investment ready. Recommendation 3 to 5 is a gender strategy specifically for accelerators. And so for 3, we would like accelerators to expand opportunities for entrepreneurs by partnering with international accelerators, offering free networking opportunities, and a range of pricing options in order to meet to service different types of entrepreneurs. Recommendation 4 speaks to the need for accelerators to respond to the business needs of entrepreneurs by providing one-on-one mentorship, programs that teach digital strategy, legal knowledge, tax codes, and finance. In order to reach more women entrepreneurs, accelerators should internally gender disaggregate their data, deliver inclusive communications, and offer targeted programs and services. Recommendation 6 is for federal and local actors to gather gender disaggregated data as well, and conduct more research on the effectiveness of past government investments and interventions for entrepreneurial growth. And finally, recommendation 7 is for universities and NGOs to play a greater role in building networks and advocating for women entrepreneurs. And so while there is definitely a need for collective effort to bridge the gap, the finance gap in Mexico, many of the actors we interviewed are doing great work in reducing the barriers women face, and we find their work to be an inspiration for change. thank you for the opportunity to present today, and we will be happy to answer any questions you may have during the Q&A portion of today's agenda.
Thank you very much to the Columbia University SIPA team. We're now going to turn to our Harvard University Kennedy School presentation. The team is represented by Jeremy Bhatia, Aisha Iqbal, and Caroline Kaufman. We welcome the Harvard Kennedy School team.
Thank you all for coming to the presentation today, and also a special thank you to the Ananda Group and Women Forward International for supporting this research and working with us this past year. It's been a really rewarding experience. And I think I can, speak for Aisha, Caroline, and myself. We were all really attracted to this project for a few reasons. I think one, climate change is, I think, one of the biggest issues that humanity has ever faced, and shifting towards plant-based options. I think there was even an article in the New York Times today talking about how people are going to start shifting away from meat just due to necessity. And so this was a really great opportunity to help support the growth of that industry. And then the second angle is obviously a gender angle. And I think all three of us really, believe in the equality of opportunity. As a man, it's kind of tough for me to be touting this as much as Caroline and Aisha, but I really feel that it's extremely important having, a sister, a wife, and a mother who are all strong women who have done great things. I just feel that it's important that everyone has an equal opportunity to, achieve what they want and what they're able to. So with that, we can give you a little bit of a background on the information on our research. Caroline, if you go to the next slide. So we set out to answer two main questions, and those were trying to identify what services, programs, accelerators, and interventions could be most useful for women entrepreneurs and women-owned businesses, specifically in the plant-based industry in Mexico. And we wanted to look at it from both the angle of the entrepreneurs and then the industry overall, and how we could support the growth and development of it. So to conduct this research, we did both. Fortunately, we were able to make it to Mexico before the COVID crisis, and we did a week of in-person interviews with entrepreneurs, accelerators, advocacy organizations, investors, and then business training. And then outside of this research, we also conducted additional interviews online with accelerators and investors in the United States, advocacy organizations in Brazil, Guatemala, and Hong Kong. So some high-level trends right now, as many people are aware, the plant-based industry is growing rapidly around the world, and specifically in the United States over the past few years, it's been growing extremely fast. And I think in Latin America now, they're starting to see a shift in consumption as well. And however, what kind of is the biggest attribute of this industry is that 75% of entrepreneurs are women in Mexico. And a lot of these organizations are smaller right now. Majority of them are in what they call, tier 2 or tier 3 businesses, whereas in kind of more nascent sectors, they are of a larger size or tier 1 sector. And then in a lot of the business activities centered in Mexico City, Guadalajara, and Monterrey. However, there are kind of emerging business hubs in Querétaro and Mérida as well. So a few other we tried to segment the entrepreneurship ecosystem and provide a little bit more detail on that as well. And we broke it into these 6 categories. So in each of these categories, we have a couple of stats here listed. On the investor side, we see a lot of the capital is concentrated in Mexico City. And there is, I think also the SIPA presentation elucidated this. There's kind of this missing middle tier of capital. And from a programmatic side, I think, the last administration had supported INADEM and Startup Mexico, which has since been defunded. And we, based on our research, saw that as an extremely, unwise decision based on what we've seen in Startup Chile and other countries where this incubation service supported by the government is crucial to providing this base of the pyramid. And then there's also large corporations that are now starting to move into the plant-based sector. And then the human capital is largely concentrated in Mexico City, with large gaps in talent in the regional, on the outside regions, specifically in tech, where businesses seem to struggle to hire those crucial roles such as data science and engineers.
Great, thank you, Jeremy. So based on our research, our team identified what we saw as 6 primary buckets of what we thought were the biggest challenges facing entrepreneurs and business owners in the plant-based sector. And so to quickly go through these, we have access to capital, and you can kind of see we have this chart here of what our interviewees responded as seeing the biggest challenge, the one biggest challenge facing their business, and many of them responded investment. A lot of folks that we spoke with mentioned having to rely on either personal savings or support from family and friends in starting up their businesses. Access to markets was another really important thing that came up many times, particularly for this industry. We found it was particularly difficult for entrepreneurs either to break out from their specific geographic location or else to break into new clientele bases. It tends to be a very specific set of people who are looking for plant-based products. Business skills was something that we found was particularly interesting as well. A lot of folks that we spoke with were starting their business really motivated by values. So we heard sometimes this had to do with health reasons. It may have had to do with, reasons related to climate change, but it wasn't necessarily because of an existing set of business skills. So this was something many people cited as a challenge to them. Access to networks as well was something a lot of people noted as a challenge, and particularly in terms of having plant-based networks. This was not something we found really existed, and I could talk about that a little bit later. Legal barriers is a challenge pretty much everywhere, but particularly in Mexico, it seemed that a lot of entrepreneurs had difficulties in figuring out exactly how to start up their businesses. And then gender barriers, which I think, and Jeremy talked about this in his introduction, but I think for our team was particularly resonant. So gender barriers not only exacerbate a lot of these challenges that we've mentioned, and again, the SEPA team really discussed how it particularly exacerbates access to capital, but it also presents its own challenges as well. So, gender cultural stereotypes can either prevent women from being able to start a business, but more often it comes across in more micro aggressions in terms of once women do have businesses, having their seriousness called into question, really preventing them from being able to more easily grow their business. And something I found particularly interesting about this is that around the world, there really is this lack of data in terms of what works for women to overcome these barriers. So I actually saw a huge opportunity for the plant-based sector in Mexico being so heavily dominated by women to invest more heavily in this type of data collection and to really find out what does work. So I think that's actually an exciting opportunity. So our team identified a handful of services and programs that either exist in Mexico, but that can be built up to be more specific to the plant-based sector, or else that are just missing entirely. So in terms of services that already exist, we've identified business trainings. So the trainings on the basics of business, like finance and business models, incubators, to help stimulate growth in early stage entrepreneurs. Accelerators are similar, but for more developed businesses. And then networks, which can either be the formal or informal connections between different actors in these ecosystems. And pretty much across all 4, we found that while these are available in Mexico, they are primarily based in big cities like Mexico City. So their access is not widespread outside of these areas. And then there's really a lack of focused programming on the plant-based sector, which many people told us a challenge for them or was a reason that they weren't partaking in these services. And then finally, in terms of programs and services that we found is completely missing, one that we thought would be really useful was a public relations campaign, particularly for this type of sector that has a lot of stereotypes and stigma associated with it, to really change that mentality around what plant-based products are and stimulate demand with new customers. As Jeremy was kind of mentioning, government-sponsored incubators or accelerators, particularly in this current administration, are hugely important to increasing widespread access to these services. Middle tier capital as well. I think we've heard a little bit about how this is really the missing middle, and that's very important, particularly we saw for spurring regional growth. And then, as I was mentioning, data collection. Given that this is such a niche industry, there's not a lot of widespread data on what works. So really being intentional about collecting more data to help inform decision making.
Thanks, Caroline. So we tried to come up with some different policy options, and in order to consider those, we had 7 criteria that we considered, and we tried to look at it from, I guess, 3 different angles. One was from the view of entrepreneurs. The second was from Ananda Group standpoint, and then finally, how would this impact the industry overall? So these 7 criteria are meant to address each of these almost equally, and then we proposed options that could try and address each of these different criteria. So we had 10 policy options in total, and we segmented them based on the stage of the organization. Here they are, and then I think we can jump to the next slide. And I'll lay out the 5 recommendations we landed on. So we tried to come up with a list of recommendations that could both be implemented in the short term and then also kind of have a longer lead time to see an impact, as well as recommendations that could impact individual businesses and then the ecosystem as a whole. So we found that, as Caroline mentioned, many of the organizations are mission driven, that doing some low level 1 or 2 day business skills training would be hugely valuable to many of the entrepreneurs. And then also specific networks for the plant-based industry, and then also around gender would be very valuable, as this is one of the key criteria for a business success at an early stage, is having a strong network. And then also the advocacy partnerships. In our research in Brazil, it suggested that the Good Food Institute and a few other organizations have come together to really spur the plant-based industry by working with universities and the government to allocate funds towards this high-tech research. And then having specific gender programming that can take into account the challenges that women specifically face, as well as providing a forum to kind of overcome those challenges, we find really useful. And I think the data collection will be crucial as that programming is implemented. And then finally, with a longer lead time, is building partnerships at the academic level, so that a lot of the research required to develop this high-tech industry can be started to be developed and then ultimately be implemented and released into products that can help build this industry. So hopefully with these recommendations, we can spur growth in the industry, more equal participation, and then also just have a future where other industries like the plant-based industry have a kind of an easier path to grow and be inclusive. So thank you all for listening, and really, really, again, appreciate all of the support during this process.
Thank you very much to the Harvard Kennedy School team. I'd like to ask the team just a quick question, and I don't know if Aisha has her sound available yet, but it's a question we talked about, not a surprise. It's just, what is it that makes the plant-based industry so important to support, and what is its relevance to women? Maybe it's a question for Jeremy or Caroline, if Aisha's not on. I guess at the beginning of the presentation, I was wondering why even focus on the plant-based industry?
I think there are a couple of reasons the plant-based sector is really important. One is that, as Jeremy was talking about a little bit, just globally, but also in Mexico, there's huge growth potential in this industry. And so, while it's somewhat small right now, it's growing really quickly and has a lot of potential to drive overall economic growth in Mexico. It's also really important in terms of climate change and gender equality and some other of these SDGs that are very important to Women Forward International and to our team as well. I think we mentioned that the industry is run about 75% by women, so by either women entrepreneurs, women-owned businesses, which is incredibly unique. It's pretty rare to see an industry like that. So it not only presents a great opportunity for other industries, I think, to follow suit and to be more inclusive in women and to use this as kind of a model for that. But, it's also obviously a huge opportunity to lift up women entrepreneurs and business owners just in themselves in this industry.
Great, thank you very much, Caroline. And thank you very much to the Harvard Kennedy School team again. I'd now like to call on the clients of these 2 student teams, Pro Mujer, represented by Natalia Wills, and the Ananda Group, represented by Rocio Cavazos. the question I'd like to pose to the clients is, now that you've received these recommendations for your work, how will they influence your work and the advancement of women? Will you be able to use these recommendations in the short and long term? And if so, how? Let's start with Natalia Wills, country representative for Mexico for Pro Mujer, and then we'll go to Rocio Cavazos, the founding managing partner of the Ananda Group.
Well, thank you so much, Kim. And first of all, I would like to thank Women Forward International, you and the Capstone Project for making this research possible. It was a great experience for us, and we hope this is the first of more, because this is a topic that we really want to deep dive into. Also, I would like to thank the students for putting all their effort and good attitude in doing the project despite all the difficulties. For instance, they were very eager in coming to Mexico and doing field work, and at the end that was not possible, unfortunately, due to the pandemic. But still, the research was great, and I think the findings and the quotes from the women are amazing to realize and to confirm that gender gaps are still broad, and the path for women entrepreneurs to access capital is more difficult than for their men. We are seeing also in the Harvard research. So, and it happens regardless of their business quality, regardless of the competences of the entrepreneur, and regardless of the socioeconomic background. But when you add up those layers of inequality, then the gaps are even broader. So we have been working as Pro Mujer for 30 years in Latin America, empowering women, especially low-income women, and working with micro-entrepreneurs. But now, as we see that the barriers are similar across the board, we also are starting to work with SGBs and seeing all the potential that these women also have for contributing, changing the ecosystem and to advance gender equality. So we are very happy to have this research to share it broadly. We want to visualize the existing gaps, and we find this as a very valuable tool to continue doing that. In regards of the recommendations, of course, we will be able to build on them, to strengthen what we have been doing, and to develop new projects and programs. We have been working, and we will continue to do so, promoting gender lens investing at the ecosystem level. We have been doing events, and we are trying to generate awareness on this topic, which is huge. But also we are having now what investors say skin in the game. So last year we launched the ILU Women's Empowerment Fund together with Ditken Impact with a comprehensive strategy, which is one of the recommendations, to invest $35 million into women-led businesses and businesses that have an impact in women and girls in Latin America. Pro Mujer was in charge of developing the gender strategy, and it's a very broad strategy that goes not like throughout the whole investment process, from pipeline sourcing, communication, deployment of funds, and also we are working on technical assistance for those who access these funds. So we have already deployed $40 million from this fund across Latin America. For example, there is one very interesting enterprise that we support in Lago Titicaca in Peru that is called Pisces. It's a sustainable fish farm, and we're working with them for the last year together with Ditken, strengthening the business, and it has had an amazing impact, and we see a lot of empowered women working in these factories, PC factories in Peru. In addition, we have a partnership with Viwala, which is New Ventures Financial Institution, to tackle the missing middle. And we, together with Value for Women, developed also a holistic gender strategy, developing the criteria for businesses to access and so. But for us, it has been great because we have seen how New Ventures has embraced this gender approach, and now Viwala has set as a priority for them to fund women-led businesses, aiming to have a 50% portfolio composed by women-led SGBs. or business with a gender focus. It is that positively impact the life of women and girls. So this is great because the commitment has gone beyond expected, and that's part of what we're trying to build is to advocate at the private level and invite others to embrace the gender approach, because at the end this is a moral decision but also a business decision. And finally, we will be working in creating business development services that are tailor-made for the needs of business women as the research suggested, identifying and hearing women's voices to use that as an input for developing new and strengthening the programs that we already have in the region. So definitely this has been very valuable, and we have been working on some of the issues, but the research has helped us to identify ways to strengthen what we have been working and what we will continue to do at the ecosystem level. And there is still a long way to go, but we are very committed to work with others, and especially in partnerships, to advance and to advance gender equality and to close the gaps that we face for getting investments and financial system services.
Thank you very much, Natalia. We're now going to hear from Rocio Cavazos of the Ananda Group.
Thank you. Well, first of all, I want to thank Women Forward International, the Harvard Kennedy School team, and their faculty advisors, including Professor Dutch Leonard, whom we had the pleasure of meeting. I want to thank them all for their hard work, their extensive research, analysis, and their recommendations, which are critical inputs to our strategic planning and our ability to serve the sector we work with. Thank you very much for that. And regarding the implementation of their recommendations, certainly, I'm very happy to report that as we speak, we're actually working on the implementation of one of their major recommendations, which is regarding the creation of an association for the plant-based sector in Mexico. We are incorporating and in the process of launching the Association of Vegan Entrepreneurs in Mexico. We're very excited. We have a number of founding members already involved in the process. We've certainly have had to adapt to our current reality, but we're very much continue with the process and plan to be announcing this very soon. So this association will act as a network for connection and exchange among entrepreneurs, and will be providing services to support the growth and the success of the plant-based sector in Mexico. In terms of other recommendations that we're thinking of implementing in the short term, one of them is around the advocacy and PR partnerships. We're thinking about things such as meant to raise awareness among the general public. For example, we very much appreciate the specific recommendations around potential partnerships with organizations such as Mercy for Animals and the Good Food Institute that we think would make a lot of sense, given that these organizations are very high profile, very professional, and any collaboration or campaign done with them would certainly be very robust and far-reaching. Another recommendation for the short term, which we think is very important, is the one around gender-specific programming. And this can take different forms. One of them, which is mentioned specifically in the report, is the potential creation of a women's network within the association, which we'll definitely be considering. And there's other ways this can take form, such as the creation of a task force within the association that can address gender-specific challenges and propose programs and services. Another recommendation in this regard was around partnering with advocacy organizations to create awareness of gender barriers, which we think makes a lot of sense, because even in a sector that is majority women-led, as we've heard from the team, women still report facing challenges and barriers, and they still operate in the general marketplace, in the general economy, and have to deal with the same cultural and social barriers that women face in other sectors. Another very important recommendation that we would like to implement in the short to medium term is the one related to business and technology skills training. We very much agree this is a critical need in the plant-based sector, being such a young sector. Most of the companies are very new, and many entrepreneurs, learn by doing, sometimes by trial and error, and we think, we could help them along this learning curve with the appropriate services. And we specifically appreciate the suggestions for, potential partners, organizations that already exist in Mexico and that offer services that could be of value to entrepreneurs in the sector. And finally, well, this might be more in the long term, as identified by the team itself, but we also think it is very important to consider academic and research partnerships to development in the sector. We agree that we would like to promote the development and the use of more technology in the plant-based sector in Mexico. And we value the suggestions to, for example, to approach some of the tech-oriented universities in Mexico as potential partners in this effort, and even some organizations outside Mexico which were identified in the report with whom we could seek to collaborate on this.
Thank you very much, Rocio Cavazos. Thank you very much to our clients. We want to broaden this discussion directly to a practitioner and a chef. We are pleased to welcome Chef Georgina Mayer, who is now going to treat us with a virtual food intervention and describe her artistry as a vegan chef and restaurant owner in Mexico, and how women-run businesses in the food industry create more healthy living and contribute to Mexico's achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals. Chef Georgina Mayer, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Ken. Thank you for inviting me. I'm very honored. And I have a short time that I want to share with you some of what I do. And after listening to these two groups of students, and I think they've done a great job, because I could empathize with what they were saying all the time. Since I was a very young girl, I knew that I wanted to do something related with food and health. That has been my passion for a long time. Since I've been very young, and now I can see that has been my life mission, in a way that I've been wanting to share these and learn for myself, and then share with my family, share with my friends. And this turned into sharing more and more with the community and more people. And then this all led to a business, but I don't have a business background. I was a mom to 4 girls. And then I stumbled upon, through all my work and me first being a chef in my own house, and then sharing that with people who wanted to eat healthier. And then this turned into something that needed more preparation for myself. And then I stumbled with macrobiotics, with this, which is basically a philosophy and a guide to living healthier through choosing healthier lifestyle, diet, and activity, and connecting with nature. And that made a lot of sense with me, because that is what I have learned through the years. That was my mission. So I loved what I heard this morning from all of you. It has become into something that I do every day with a lot of love. I love my work. I want to get people to understand that we can eat healthier, live in a healthier planet, more compassionate with other beings, and have all the nutrients, all that we need, and it can be beautiful food, it can be healthy food, and that's what's important in the end, because people, when they present themselves with the idea of a plant-based diet, they see other things. I don't know, they just think plain salad or something, and it's much more than that. So it's taking care of so many things to entice people in so many ways. And most of the people that come to visit us in Casa Macro, they're not, or in the beginning, they were not thinking about plant-based diets, because Monterrey, as you may know, is a city where lots of animal foods are promoted. It's kind of the culture here. So a macrobiotic plant-based restaurant seemed like a crazy idea at a point, and it's so satisfying to see people who were coming because they were coming with a friend that followed a plant-based diet or something, that they leave so happy and feel satisfied, and that is really so great for us. I wanted to show you this picture where we have a little garden here at Casa Macro, and the picture on the top is 2013, when we finally set up in a place and started growing this business. And how it is, this picture is 2019. So can you see that you put a little seed, and the earth is so generous that it gives us all that we need. And that has become like what we try to do, sowing seeds for health. And we're learning continuously. And we, as you were asking, how are women businesses so important to develop a healthier life and a healthier planet? I think women, we have the creative characteristic. Creativity is part of who we are, and this is such an important thing, that we develop these characteristics in young girls and then empower them to know that they can create so many things, girls and boys as well. But we know, and we've listened this morning, how women tend to be focused on other things, or when you want to, after being a mom, you want to go back and do something else and continue creating, you usually have a difficult time finding the funding, and especially the business skills. And so this has come into it. This is what I do every day. I love doing it, and it's not only me, it's a great team. It's my family supporting me, and it's every person that comes here to learn how to cook these things. Most of our employees don't know how to cook this. They don't have a plant-based background, but I think it has been part of what we do to teach them first and then teach everybody else. I don't know if you have any other question.
Great. Thank you very much, Georgina. Okay, I have a question from the audience for the student teams. What was the most rewarding experience in terms of your research, and what did you discover that was a surprise?
I can answer. So I'm part of the SIPA team. And so the most rewarding experience was actually the interactions with the entrepreneurs. That's what we were looking forward to the most, coming to Mexico. And even though we weren't able to actually go to Mexico, I still felt like a connection with these great leaders in Mexico that were like building great organizations, and hearing them not only talk about their successes, but also their struggles. It was a really authentic and enriching experience. And something that I don't know if it surprised me the most, but it was really nice to hear, was that in one of the accelerator interviews, the interviewee spoke to the fact that there are less women entrepreneurs who were applying to the programs, but when women entrepreneurs got to the program stage, once they completed the programs, they were producing, their results were just as, their the revenues that their organizations were generating were just as high as men. So it was nice to have that confidence that, I mean, I already knew it, but it was great to see it in actual numbers that, you know, women entrepreneurs can produce just at the same rate as male entrepreneurs can.
Thank you very much. I'm going to read several questions that have just come in. The panelists and students answer. We have a question. I'm interested in understanding how the participants for the interviews were identified. That's the first one. Another one. A question for Georgina Mayer, the chef. Is your business self-funded or did you raise angel capital? And another question from Mexico City. Again, for the chef, Georgina, what was your biggest challenge when you decided to become an entrepreneur? Let's answer those three.
Okay. Do you want me to go first?
Sure.
Okay. I was funded by family members. That was basically it. And it started that way, totally. And I really thank them because they believed in me. And what was my biggest challenge? I think my biggest challenge is business tools. I was a chef, I was a mom, I was a chef, I'm an architect as well. And I have a little knowledge on how to administrate a business, but we're still learning. We have some coaching going on and everything, but that has been my biggest challenge, as well as I was telling you, the people who work with us, giving them the tools and teaching them, and then sometimes there's a lot of rotation, so we had to implement a way to not spend so much time training new people every time. So those are the two.
Great, thank you. And the question for the student team, how did you choose the participants in the study?
Sure, I'm happy to jump in for the Columbia project. So we experienced some difficulties, as you know, not being able to travel, but we got a lot of help from our client Pro Mujer in terms of introducing us virtually and sort of leveraging their connections, as well as the students. And I think, so the sample we have, I mean, in terms of how representative it is and the size, it's quite small. It also has a lot of impact investors, a few commercial investors, but I think one of the takeaways we had is, although we great anecdotal and qualitative information about the experiences of women, we hope that in future studies, a wider net can be cast to capture, women entrepreneurs working in a variety of sectors, not only in social impact and within that sort of social entrepreneurship ecosystem, but getting a wider sample. But I think that there's a lot of interesting insight that we got from this research itself.
Great, thank you. We do have a lot of questions coming in. I'm going to read one more and then we're going to turn to our next speaker, and we will have more time for Q&A at the end. But there is a question for the clients. How can we join the efforts of Pro Mujer and Ananda in Mexico?
Well, if you want to join Pro Mujer, our efforts in Pro Mujer, please contact me and contact us through our social media, and we will reply immediately. Because we are really looking to create a coalition of organizations and people that are interested in advancing this topic. We are very active in the social impact ecosystem, but also as we work with many women also from indigenous and rural areas, we have a very broad scope. So we are happy to collaborate with many organizations, as many organizations and it's possible. And if, I don't know the profile of the person that put the question into, but we are very happy to, I can receive directly any person that wants to join this effort. So.
Thank you, Natalia. Rocio, would you like to field that question as well?
Sure. In our case, at Ananda, what we offer is angel investment, and we are also strongly now focusing on offering other types of services that we have identified are highly needed by entrepreneurs in the plant-based sector, and that we have actually received strong confirmation from the Harvard Kennedy School team, services around, business development services, skills, trainings, mentoring. And so, we're obviously very open and happy to consider, collaborations either on the investment or, the training and mentoring aspects of the work we do. And you can contact us through our webpage, the AnandaGroup.mx. And me personally, I'll be also happy to engage in conversations and find ways we can collaborate to support entrepreneurs that are really being part of the solution and contributing to the new ways of life we need to implement in our planet. Thank you. Thank you for asking that question.
Thank you, Rocio Cavazos. We're going to now turn to actually, one of the questions was, how can we read these reports and what are the next steps? And I just wanted to share that these reports will be available on the Women Forward International website, but also published by our partner, United Nations Institute for Training and Research. And speaking of the United Nations, we will have our representative from UN Women, Mexico, next. Her name is Mitzi Jasmine Baquiero Nunez, and she is a specialist for economic empowerment and education at the United Nations. She is taking the place, she's representing Belis, who could not join us this morning for an important scheduling challenge. So she has sent her representative, Mitzi Baquiero Nunez, and we look forward to hearing from her now. I believe she is now on the line.
Yes, hello, good morning, everyone. Can you hear me well?
Yes, thank you.
Perfect, thank you. Well, first of all, thank you for the invitation to UN Women, and also Ms. Belen sends her apologies. You know, these are very troubling times in schedules and everything. So yes, I'm happy to be here and to hear about these two capstone projects, very in.
As the UN, as part of UN Women in Mexico, how do you see the role of UN Women in empowering Mexican women entrepreneurs? And like Mexico, do you find it a global phenomenon, and just not just in Mexico, that women are spurring growth, innovation, and leadership through industries that just happen to benefit the overall social good of their countries?
Okay, thank you. Well, first of all, UN Women is an entity dedicated to gender equality and empowerment of women. It supports the UN member states. They set global standards for achieving the gender equality, and it works with government, civil society to design laws, policies, programs, and services that are needed to ensure that the standards are effectively implemented and truly benefit the women and girls worldwide. One of the key areas in which UN Women works is investing in women's economic empowerment, because we know and we believe that it sets a direct path towards gender equality and inclusive economic growth. Therefore, we work building strategic alliances with the private sector, with civil society, with governments, and different stakeholders to empower women to generate data that demonstrate women's enormous contributions to economies, whether in businesses, in farms, as entrepreneurs or employees, or by doing unpaid care work at home. That is also very important. So one of the ongoing programs that has a key component for women entrepreneurs empowerment is Avancemos por la Igualdad, or Moving Forward Equality Capacity Strengthening Program. This program was launched in 2018, focusing on the economic empowerment of women in communities affected by the 2017 earthquakes in Mexico City and Juchitán, Oaxaca. The goal of the program is the economic reactivation of areas affected by the earthquakes through innovative business initiatives. The first generation started being trained in 2018 with 2 training centers and with on-site nurseries available. The training courses focused on strengthening the entrepreneurial and leadership abilities And women also benefited from gender-responsive psychological care and risk management workshops. So another ongoing program here in Mexico is the UN Women Second Chance Education Vocational Learning Program, which aims to provide quality education materials and training for labor market insertion and entrepreneurship initiatives to approximately 5,000 women. The program is implemented in 3 Mexican states, is Jalisco, Estado de Mexico, and Puebla. So a key component of this program is that it also develops in the participants a combination of soft skills, such as confidence, leadership, creativity, management of emotions, communication, but also hard skills such as computing and IT skills, basically.
Camera did not come on, didn't ask me to choose. I'm going to.
Sorry?
Apologies, you can go ahead, just as short.
So yeah, this key component of this second chance education program is the development of soft skills and hard skills. And so about the second question about women spurring growth, innovation, and leadership, it is a very good sign that the CEPA capstone team found that accelerator programs in Mexico have widely achieved gender balance among the participants. However, in Latin America and the Caribbean, around 70% of women-led small and medium-sized enterprises report being financially unserved or underserved. So they need savings, also insurance and other products to strengthen their businesses, which means that there are still many gaps to be closed. That is why in UN Women in Mexico, we work closely with the women from the most vulnerable and marginalized population. So we have to consider all these gaps that we still have in Mexico to access to financial products and everything. So also studies have shown that companies with diversity are more innovative. So therefore, every day more companies are more interested in incorporating the gender perspective in their activities. As an example, the Women's Empowerment Principles, or WEPs, as we call them, which are a set of 7 principles established by UN Global Compact and UN Women, offer guidance to companies on how to promote gender equal empowerment in the workplace, the marketplace, but also in the community, which is very, very important. Worldwide, there are around 3,000 web signatories, which give us an idea on how companies and women also within these companies are spurring growth, innovation, leadership through all kinds of industries that are benefiting overall social goods. Thank you.
Thank you very much for joining us and for representing the work of UN Women today. It's so important, and we're very appreciative of having your insights. I'm now going to turn to the impact of the studies both locally and on the grassroots and globally, from the point of view of the international community and its leaders, including the United Nations. For reasons of scheduling of our guest speakers, we will start with the local, with a group of speakers, each of whom works as a business owner and directly or indirectly advises other businesses in Mexico. Given the student recommendations and our discussion today, what are your key takeaways? How does today's discussion motivate you to empower women-run businesses in Mexico? We are going to turn to Diana Popa, co-founder and CEO of Extensión, Paula Rebollar, owner of Zahini, and Roberto Salinas Leon, Director of America Atlas Network and President of the Mexico Business Forum. I'd like to turn first to Roberto. Let us start with you. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. It's a great honor to be part of this program, and I'd like to thank, of course, Women Forward International, as well as my friend Enrique Verruga of the Aspen Institute in Mexico for putting together this very innovative exchange of ideas. Congratulations to both teams of Columbia and Harvard for truly groundbreaking studies on something which one of my takeaways is this is not just about empowering equality, as important as that is, especially in a culture like Mexico's that comes from a tradition very much male dominated and the famous machismo that surrounds it, that has surrounded this large but especially business culture in the past 50 years or so. One of my key takeaways is that the way to envision the effort to empower women entrepreneurs is the focus on a mission. The focus that we heard from Georgina, for instance, it's not just about the beauty of the presentation, it's also about the health involved in what you're consuming. And of course, Harvard's study and the emphasis on a sector, on a specific sector, on a growing and budding and promising sector such as plants. I think those are very key takeaways to very much focus on our mission. I again repeat, it's not just, I think, about one of my takeaways is not just about gender equality, but also about entrepreneurship in general. What are the challenges that Mexico is facing, that Mexican women are facing in sectors that are dominated by women entrepreneurs, and especially small, medium, and micro-sized sectors that are dominated by women entrepreneurs? What are the key takeaways and what are the key challenges in capital fundraising, in being able to market their opportunities, and being able to try and capture a greater economy of scale, and being able to develop what they're doing? One question for all of you, particularly for the Harvard and Columbia students, is: have you seen a negative role of what some specialists, and I consider myself among this group of those that are studying what Luis de la Calle calls extortionomics, and how the vast amount of bureaucratic red tape, particularly at local levels, the most important level, at community levels, hampers the ability to be able to get ahead from an entrepreneurial point of view, and for women, young women, able to address the entrepreneurial challenges of developing their lines of. I think that's a key question, and perhaps something that could be incorporated into future discussions of empowering women entrepreneurs in Mexico. I also think that this is my final takeaway: the idea of partnering with international agents and with strategic associations that even go beyond the usual ones, the very influential ones. But I think that'll be a tremendous source of knowledge of what things are taking place in other parts of the world as far as empowering women. That's a key takeaway, something that I myself would like to explore in my own advisory and business strategies. Once again, it's a pleasure to be part of this conversation, and congratulations to both teams for fabulous presentations.
Thank you very much, Roberto. Diana Popa, let us turn to you now.
Hi everybody. Thank you very much, Women Forward International, Pro Mujer, Ananda Group for the invitation and for the space. And thank you to the teams of Harvard Kennedy School and the CIPA team from Columbia for the studies, which I found really remarkable. And as Georgina was saying, like listening and going through the studies before the Zoom meeting, I was feeling identified with a lot of the findings that you mentioned in the studies. About my takeaways, I think the first one would be the importance of diversity. And I think, yeah, I completely agree also with Roberto's point on this, that it's not about taking women and putting women in the place of men. It's about integrating the woman in the ecosystem with everything that the woman, as well as any other individual and group of individuals in our societies that are not like the mainstream business person, all that these groups, all that we as women can bring to the ecosystem, can bring to business with our different points of view, with our different creativity, with with everything that we can bring as women and as individuals. So I think this is one of the most important findings I found in the studies. And I think it's good also for us as women to hear and to share with other women that we don't have to be men. We can be women, and we have something very important to bring to the ecosystem as being women. A second point is, I think, applies for women and men alike in the ecosystem of entrepreneurship in Mexico, is the missing middle. And this is a point that, yes, affects us as business women, but I think it affects the whole ecosystem. And I felt we in Extensio, we are a social business, we are a big corporation, and we dedicate ourselves to changing the rural communities through access to information. We have a mobile information system for smallholder farmers. We work with almost 20,000 farmers in Mexico, Colombia, and Ecuador. And we are now raising our first round of capital. The business has been financed through my own fund. So yeah, my own funds as a funder and those of my associate. And right now we are raising our first round, and we are in that exact missing middle. And one of the findings of the CIPA studies, I think, was that international funding can be a short-term solution for the missing middle, while this capacity appears more and more in Mexico. And indeed, this is like the solutions that we are working on right now. To end with, my third takeaway is, I think, the importance of and education in general. Yeah, I think that men and women alike, we all come from a family. We have a family background. We have a cultural education. We have a formal education. No, and sometimes it's maybe more difficult as an ecosystem to impact directly what's happening in each family. But we can work with the education institutions to start integrating the gender lens equality, like from the percentage of men and women that attend all kinds of careers. Because as we have men-dominated careers, we have women-dominated careers. So we think that we need this diversity in all careers. And I think the university, and I see it in myself and in other women entrepreneurs, I think we all had the chance to come from academic backgrounds that yes, made us believe that we as women can be just as valuable as men, and that we can bring something to the society, and that we can be entrepreneurs and we can take this step. So this would be my 3 takeaways. And again, congratulations to both teams for the excellent research they've made.
Thank you, Diana Popa. She is co-founder and CEO of Extensio. We'll now turn to Paola Rebollar. She is owner of Zahini.
Hi, everyone. First of all, as well, thank you to Women Forward for the invitation to participate in the event. And thank you especially to the Harvard Kennedy students for their report and for taking us into consideration in their final report. We, as Diana, we also feel very identified with the findings highlighted in the report. And as well, despite of all the barriers and challenges that entrepreneurs face in Mexico, we feel that the plant-based sector is in a unique position to continue growing and has great opportunities. My 3 takeaways would also be around funding, network, and education. So we also struggled to get funding from venture capitals at the stage that we were back then, based on our needs. So we also resorted to friends and family to get that funding, which was something that I was very surprised as well from the report. And well, not surprised, because I think we've identified that was a big gap here in Mexico for entrepreneurs. On the other side, I think we were lucky enough to be part of incubators and accelerators here in Mexico, where we were able to learn new business skills, improve those skills, and keep learning, right? So that's something I find that that's something that we have to face every day. We have to keep learning, we have to keep adapting. And something that we got from those incubators and those accelerators was a very valuable network. We are still in touch with a lot of the entrepreneurs that we met back then. And something very valuable was all the mentorship and all the time and advice that we got through these incubators and through family and friends. So something that we also feel is important is that whenever we meet a new entrepreneur that has some challenges, we're more than happy to help them, because we find that somehow giving back to the community and making the synergy to make the community stronger and push all the entrepreneurs in the plant-based sector in Mexico. So we think that the veganciation that the Ananda Group will initiate will be of huge importance and will create a huge momentum in our community. We, in terms of our network, I mean, we're still supporting all these entrepreneurs, as I said, like all the advice that we've gotten, we try to also share it with other people whenever they ask for advice. And finally, I think I was also, even though most of my clients and buyers are women, I was still surprised to learn that 75% of the businesses led in Mexico in the plant-based sector are by women. So I find that we are in a very unique position to initiate a change and to impact the next generation in Mexico. And that's through nutrition and climate change. So we have, through new business skills that we can learn and the network that we can leverage, we are in a unique position to impact the next generation of entrepreneurs, of young adults, to make a positive change in Mexico and in the world. Finally, I would like to thank again the students, both the two students group, for their reports and highlighting and bringing people all these challenges that we face too, so that we can discuss them and start acting on them.
Thank you very much, Paola Rebollar. She is owner of Zahini. I will go next from the local to global implications. I'd like to ask three of our panelists now, who each work in development of sustainable agricultural practices that empower women. How might these two studies positively impact your work? And is there any recommendation you have heard today that you would be able to use right away? With us today, we have Gabriela Lucas-Dick, co-founder and general director of Kiaspi Mexico; Lina Dolores Paul Alfaro, representative of the Food and Agricultural Organization, FAO, of the United Nations in Mexico; and Monica Ducoing, Central America and Mexico Regional Chapter Manager of the Aspen Network of Development Entrepreneurs, ANDE. Gabriela, let us start with you.
I am an agriculture engineer, and I have an ONG, and we teach how to grow food and vegetables in rural communities in all Mexico, in Guatemala, Honduras, and Chile we have been. And one thing I think is very important to remember is that the women decide what comes on the table, you know, and I think in all the world, the mothers, it's changing a little bit because a lot of more women are working, but I think it's missing that we need to educate to eat more vegetables. Now with the coronavirus epidemic, this challenge is more important than ever. We have to increase the health of our communities, of our women. And so I totally agree that it's a great moment for this plant-based diet. And these plants are produced on soil in the rural communities, not in the cities. So our main problem in the communities is the ownership of the land. The women work in the traspatio, they say, in the backyard or on the land. But if you want to help them to start a business producing whatever vegetables you can imagine, from amaranth to black beans or vegetables, the first issue we encounter is that they don't own the land. So it's very hard, and that's one of the requests for the government programs, is to show the ownership of the land. And that ownership belongs to men, the husband or the father or the brothers. Very few they're working, you know. So I think we have to put that on the list too, to help them to demonstrate that they own something and help in this transition, because in Mexico it's very complicated, el traslado de dominio, or put the name on, starting with inheritance. It's not used to that someone makes a testament in the rural area. So the women are always hanging off and depending on men regarding this important issue in their projects, no? So I agree totally with education and the other parts, but I think they're focused more in city entrepreneurships than in rural areas food are produced. So I'm very happy to have written both of the stories, no? But I think maybe we can make in the future another that is starts more in rural areas where a lot of this business starting. For example, I work with cocineras tradicionales, with women who share or they keep their recipe keepers from very ancient recipes, and we're helping them to teach them to restaurant chefs. I welcome the initiative of Eugenia. I hope to be in Monterrey soon, so I'm going to visit her restaurant. But these cocineras tradicionales, they don't get the ingredients anymore. So we go out and to the communities to see who from the other woman can help to grow this, no? And we always encounter always the same. No, I don't have a piece of land, or I don't have access of water. And the water is, again, it's administered by men. So there are a lot of issues that have to be resolved in the rural areas that goes to the city problems too, no? Because if we can produce these plant-based products, vegetables, fruits, whatever, there is no business base to start on, no? So I will be very happy to participate or help. We have a lot of experience, and even a school, we have published books regarding how to produce vegetables in any condition, and with all is in agroecological methods, so we don't use any pesticides. And we teach to health and nutrition to women as a first matter, because if they are not healthy and not taking good decisions in food, it makes no sense that they produce good food. And most of the time, I always tell them their chicken eat better than them, no? Because they don't know how to work with vegetables.
Thank you very much, Gabriela Lucas, co-founder and general director of Kiaspi in Mexico. We'll now turn to Lina Dolores Pol Alfaro, representative of the Food and Agricultural Organization of the United Nations in Mexico. Lina, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you so much. First of all, I want to thank the organizer for the invitation to comment on these two outstanding documents that will be very useful for those of us who work on these issues in Mexico. Entrepreneurs are young, mostly, small, mostly, with great potential, all of them, for the development of Mexico. But today, according with this investigation, 75% of the startups in Mexico closed within the first 2 years. So this is a big issue. Incorporating in this analysis the issue of gender and how to overcome the barriers that women face to access investment is of a crucial importance. And the two documents offer us a good overview of the limitation the women face in terms of economic training, but also sociocultural barriers. How to find financial solutions that respond to the needs of women entrepreneurs is key. The documents even go further, offer us detailed recommendations for all of the actors involved. Particularly important is how gender issues are combined with climate change and nutrition. How these women entrepreneurs are taking advantage of the opportunities and influencing to minimize the impact of climate change. How to design more effective interventions to help women entrepreneurs in vital sectors such as the plant-based sector, and the ways that can be harnessed to benefit entrepreneurs. 75% of entrepreneurs in the plant-based sectors are women. And here the two studies demonstrate the importance of behavioral changes that advance women to advance humanity. That is fantastic. So for FAO Mexico, this health is useful. In fact, we are building now a proposal to develop innovative financial mechanism for women in the milk chain. Without a doubt, this more integrative perspective will give us greater elements of analysis and will allow us to explore with the tools that you have provided, that the investigations have provided, more flexible instruments, potential partners, adapted to the needs of women and with possibilities of incorporating as a pillar of national development. Achieving gender equality among entrepreneurs is not only an ethical issue, it's not only a justice, but it's above all a theme that only by closing those gender gaps can we achieve further development in Mexico. In the end, we are smarter. So actually, congratulations team. It's gonna be very useful for us. And we're trying to continue with all these partners, this investigation to go further. And thank you so much. I'm honored. It's an honor to be here. Thank you so much and congratulations.
Thank you so much, Lina Paul Alfaro. It's an honor to have you here and to have the voice of the United Nations in Mexico with us today. I'm now going to turn to our final panelist, Monica Ducon, Central America and Mexico Regional Chapter Manager of ANDI, the Aspen Network of Development Entrepreneurs. Monica, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Kent. Yeah, first of all, thanks for the invitation and congratulations to both teams and Pro Mujer and Ananda Group. I think this is definitely research pieces that can help us advance the understanding of both women entrepreneurship in the country, but also the gaps we're facing. And I think I wanted to highlight that for me, these two studies basically reaffirm some of the existing things we already know by other research pieces. But what I really liked about them is that they focus on the local ecosystems in Mexico, but they also are focusing in two different sectors or topics. So the investment process or impact investing, and the plant-based industry. So I think just focusing all the knowledge in those two topics that are very specific and that are located within Mexico, it's very important for what we know already and how can we keep advancing in knowledge and then transfer that into the practice of different organizations. And I wanted to highlight what for me seems like maybe three of the most important points or highlights within the two research pieces. So one, it's we definitely need to look for more collaboration among ecosystem actors. You specifically highlighted among business development providers and investors, but there also the role of the academia, for example, and other types of actors in the ecosystem. So maybe sticking to that idea, how can we better leverage collaboration among different stakeholders? The second one, which might pass by, but I think it's really important, especially with the example of the plant-based industry, is that we need to foster mission-driven organizations. I think that definitely makes a difference. Plant-based, it's a really interesting example but I think there's a lot of potential in different sectors in Mexico. But how can we actually foster entrepreneurs that are mission driven? And the third point I want to leave here, it's the power of networks. So coming from an organization that it's basically a network organization like around the world, I think as long as we can start fostering a lot more these local networks, topic-based networks, or networks that like bring specialists together, and then leveraging both the knowledge but also the power within those organizations, that is going to be critical to actually like make a change and open more paths for women entrepreneurs, like to be like just to exist, but then also to be successful. So I would take like those 3 points as some that were like aha moment for me while reading the reports, but then not to lose on like the really gender gap still existing in our country, and sadly not just in our country but worldwide, and how can we work as a local ecosystem to try to bring those gaps closer.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Monica Ducoing. She is Central America and Mexico Regional Chapter Manager of the Aspen Network of Development Entrepreneurs, known as ANDE. So we will now open the floor to questions from the audience before we have our final closing remarks, and also a special treat, a musical piece that embodies the mission of our program and what we've done today and what we're going to do in the future, next steps. But I'd like to open the floor to questions, and I'd like to start actually with Roberto Salinas' question that he posed to the students, and it's about extortionomics. And I'd like to go to Jeremy Bhatia of the Harvard Kennedy School team. Jeremy, can you field that question?
Yeah, this was actually one of the areas of further research we had identified during our interviews, was that at the local level, and especially for a small business, there's a lot of regulatory loopholes to have to navigate, and not a lot of information available in order to be able to do that easily. And then the other thing that we saw too is that there's definitely this huge regional difference in the ability to start up a business and have it succeed and then grow. And so I think the two, our group had kind of said, if there was more research and more time, we would love to have been able to look into what those regulatory challenges are, and then also the regional differences and what could be done to try and overcome them.
Great, thank you, Jeremy. I'm now going to read the questions that are coming in from out there in the audience, and I'm going to open it up to the panelists to choose which ones they want to answer. I'm going to read a medley of questions. The first, what are the profiles of the entrepreneurs that both teams interviewed? Would the recommendations and findings still apply to indigenous and rural women in Mexico who work in cooperatives? Another question is for the students. What were your main reasons for choosing Mexico? We have one for the Ananda Group. How is the demand in the American market for plant-based food affecting your business? And one more for both the students and clients. What are the next steps after these projects? What is the high-level implementation plan? One last one. What is the relationship between creativity and identity that's being considered as the axis for female empowerment? Well, since no one's answering yet, I'm going to pose one more. Have you found any challenges in terms of gender-based violence that limits women from becoming entrepreneurs?
And I will address like a combination of some of the questions that were asked. One is that if these recommendations also apply for rural and indigenous women, and the other it's how does our so I would say we are definitely working on this space. Some of these recommendations definitely apply to rural and indigenous women and low-income women, because we see that the ecosystem lacks support. Like if women that have gone through schooling and that have a lot of networks and access, they are getting into these programs and accelerators that already exist, and they are identifying that those programs are not enough. They are a good basis for their development, as Diana mentioned, and also the other entrepreneur. What we see is that low-income women from vulnerable population and marginalized groups, they don't have so much support. And that's exactly, right now we are working on the development of our accompaniment methodology for working like more systematically with low-income women to strengthen their businesses, but also to develop their creativity, to innovate and get more value for them. Because usually the women that we work with in Pro Mujer and in microfinance are entrepreneurs out of necessity, and these other SGBs usually are more like opportunity entrepreneurs. So we want to work with entrepreneurs in the base of the pyramid to develop their business plans and their business models to strengthen the companies that have potential to access other markets, so they can start transiting from micro to SME and become, like in the future, investable, but also developing new instruments as the ones that we are working now with Iguala to work on this missing middle. So how can we move from microfinance to SME finance? Because the gap, as I was mentioning, is for all entrepreneurs, and the barriers are for women entrepreneurs across the board. But when you put the layer of indigenous and rural, it's even more difficult. So we are working on specific programs for those women, also hearing their needs and helping them advance from a micro enterprise to a small business.
Thank you, Natalia. Would anyone else like to field any of the other questions that were posed?
Sure,
yes.
I can answer the question about how the demand in the American market for plant-based products is affecting our business. I think it's a very interesting question because I can answer it from two perspectives. One of them is we are seeing some Mexican plant-based companies looking into the possibility of exporting their product to the U.S., which brings additional needs for investment and for other types of inputs in order to make this possible. These are, I would say, these are still a minority. These tend to be some of the most businesses, but it's very encouraging to see that some of them are in the process of approaching this very large market that we have just up north. And from the investment side, I can say, well, I personally am open to investing as an angel investor, both in Mexico and the US. And I do have to say that the demand for investment is so much larger in the US. In a way, it's to be expected because of the size of the market, because the sector itself is in a more advanced stage. And there's also the culture of entrepreneurship and investment that is more advanced there. So we do see a larger pipeline of potential investments in the US. And what we would love to see is to see a progression towards that in Mexico as well. And so what we have identified is that the need for other services such as incubators and accelerators and business skills training and mentoring that can make these entrepreneurs and these businesses more investment ready and then generate more of that demand for investment that hopefully we'll start seeing more and more of in Mexico as well.
Thank you, Rocio. That really insightful answer. And we're now looking at our Q&A session coming to a close. The time is coming to a close. We have more questions about having access to the reports, and I think sometimes the reading of the reports will answer some of the questions coming in. And I just want to reiterate that they will be available on Women Forward International's website and also on the United Nations website, UNITAR. And someone asked about next steps. I'm pleased to let everyone know that next year's Women Forward International client-based projects will build on these projects and ensure impactful next steps. You can follow our work at womenforwardinternational.org. So please also follow us on Facebook and Twitter for updates immediately on these projects. I'd now like to turn to Monica Ducoing, Central America and Mexico Regional Chapter Manager of Andy, the Aspen Network of Development Entrepreneurs, to give our closing remarks. Monica.
Thanks, Kent. So I wanted to close basically of the facts we already know, but also reflecting on them. So right now, there's no doubt that gender diversity improves investment outcomes, which at the same time drives economic growth and at the same time impact on poverty with thriving communities. It is actually estimated that by gender gap worldwide, that would contribute to increasing the global GDP by 26%. So why are we still seeing these disparities and gender inequalities? So just to share with you, like Andy has something called the Global Acceleration Learning Initiative, and we've been studying acceleration for the past years. We just published a couple of weeks ago a report focused on gender lens within acceleration. And some of the facts is that when applying to an acceleration program, 52% are all men teams, 35% are mixed gender team, but only 13% of them are all women. So we're seeing here a gap where actually women-led businesses are not even getting into acceleration programs. When applying, only 9% of women-led teams have received equity versus 21% of all men. So we're seeing a gap in financing before actually even getting to an acceleration program. Furthermore, there is a gap in average capital raised, not only in equity, but also in debt and philanthropic capital. Social conditioning of women for self-confidence plays a role in investmentations, requests, and outcomes. And women usually feel uncomfortable self-promoting due to the perceived social consequences. The financing gap is not only driven because of the enterprises or the entrepreneurs, but at least in part by investors' gender biases. So there's a lot of work to do in that field as well. And having more than 40% of women representation among mentors having more than 40% women representation among mentors, that fact is definitely associated with having more women in the application pool. So as we can see, there's a lot of small points where there's a huge gap and that we can still start working as an ecosystem. So the business case for supporting and investing in women-led businesses, it's super clear. Let's help to build the self-confidence, business skills that women need, but let's also work and even harder to build an ecosystem that is able to provide services and financing to fulfill their needs and to really start closing the gap. And because of the essence of this event, I really want to address that. I think engaging academia into this process is super important. So let's keep conducting research and having new facts and new knowledge in how to help women-led businesses. Thank you, Kent.
Thank you very much, Monica Ducoing. Thank you to all our speakers today, to the Aspen Institute in Mexico, to our students, our Women Forward International team, and to our clients and our audience and all of our panelists. Thank you to the Embassy of the State of Qatar for their support as founding donors of Women Forward International and their dedication to support the mission to advance women globally. Thank you to Misha Rutenberg, our surprise special guest singer-songwriter, whose music has uplifted thousands around the world and who has written a special song for us to live and breathe by as we courageously move through this transition into a new world. Misha Rutenberg.
Buenos dias. Hello. Actually, what I was going to say as an introduction has changed completely after listening to you. I find myself very thoughtful about my mother, who arrived in Mexico in 1949 from Russia. Within a year of my being born there, my parents were divorced, and she was a single woman, a foreigner in Mexico trying to make a living. I have to thank all of you for helping to create a world where women will not experience what my mother did. So this song I want to sing to you today is part of a group of songs I composed in quarantine. They're called My Corona Diary. One day I was with my granddaughter during this period, and I was looking at her. She's so beautiful. I'm a grandfather, so of course she's so beautiful and delightful and strong and vivacious. I was enjoying that when a wave of sadness hit me, because I started thinking about this world that we're bequeathing, we being my generation is bequeathing to her and your generation, younger people. And as I started to feel that a little too much, she burst out with some brilliant, I can't even remember what it was she said, but it was brilliant, and it transformed me and gave me hope. And I realized that there are heroes that are being born to meet the challenge of this time. You are those heroes. She is that hero. And I hope she will benefit from your efforts and carry them forward. It's a time for heroes. There's no pretending you know anything. There's no pretending you're wise. There's no pretending because it's for real. I can see it in your eyes. I can see it in your eyes. And on your love-kissed face, I see the bright shining sun. And on your sparkling eyes, I see the promise has come. And in your joyful smile, I feel the love that has won. The life of love has begun. Love and courage and the will to survive, the new day's heroes arise. In time of need, new hope has arrived. It shouldn't be a surprise. Know that I can see it in your eyes. Y en tu cara besada por amor, veo el sol tan brillante. Y en tus ojos centelleantes, veo que la promesa ha llegado. Y en tu alegre sonrisa siento el amor que ha ganado. La vida del amor ha empezado. Ha llegado el momento de los héroes. Y en tu alegre sonrisa
vida del amor ha empezado.